Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Well, it is a busy week. Early signing period is going on as people are listening to this, which is kind of an afterthought because of the timing of it. Earlier than ever, the early signing period is. We're not really going to dig into that today. I did do a piece on SDS for everything that the casual fan should know about early signing period. And I didn't just talk about Bryce Underwood. I promise. That was only one topic. So nice move by me.
This will be funny by the time people listen to this as I'm mentioning this, but woke up this morning to rumors that UCF is looking at Lincoln Riley, which obviously will not happen. But it's super funny that I woke up, saw USC's class was kind of imploding, and then it's like, why could this be? It's like, look, he's got eyes in Orlando. God, I love this.
It's a lovely place to live. He would live in a very different place than I live because people don't realize that Oviedo is not very close. And I don't live downtown, but I live closer to downtown than Oviedo is. And it only bothers me so much when they say that UCF is in downtown Orlando, and real ones know it's not very close. You know that. But yeah, early signing period is going on. We did talk about the UCF vacancy with Matt Hayes as well. He is coming up, and we're going to talk with him. We're going to talk about the future of college football playoff, coaching carousel, and he gives us an SEC championship prediction, and then we're going to close with that of the week. So we have a lot going on because, in case you forgot, we also have an SEC championship. We're going to get to a full breakdown of that. But first, Will, let's talk about this all-important playoff ranking that we got on Tuesday night. You're in Vegas right now for a George Strait Garth Brooks double feature this weekend, and you will not be in Atlanta, unfortunately. But were you watching this live as it happened? And did you hear Mario Cristobal pound a table all the way in Vegas?
I'm a big time catch up on Twitter for these events. You know, working in television, I know when I'm getting scammed, for lack of a better term. I know when something is a television event that could have been an email or could have been a tweet. So like my thing is I'm going to catch the highlights on Twitter because they already got me locked into whatever they decide to do. They don't know in a couple hours of my TV viewership. They can't take that.
Must be nice. Must be really, really nice. Yes, it was a pivotal playoff ranking show. And unfortunately for everybody not named Alabama, Alabama's at number 11 with the last spot in. Based on Ward Manuel's comments, SMU beating Clemson would guarantee that Bama is staying in the field. Also based on Ward Manuel's comments, Clemson beating SMU might still keep Bama in and force out SMU. And if everybody in America didn't collectively roll their eyes, then I'd be surprised. I've already shared my thoughts on this a lot and how much I would hate that for SMU. Anyone in the top 12 that gets to play in a conference championship game and then gets bumped for an idle team just because they lost a conference title game. I feel way more passionate about that than I did banging the drum for Bama, Miami, South Carolina, or Ole Miss to have that last spot in. Because remember, yes, Miami is at number 12, but the Big 12 champ is going to get an automatic bid as one of the 5 highest ranked conference champs. So really it's like that number 11 spot is kind of that last spot in. Well, I would just rather argue against all of those teams rather than bang the drum passionately for them. I'm not going to go full Brad Crawford like my guy's been doing for the last few weeks. Brad's been on one in ways that I've known Brad for now 10 years, close to it. I've never seen Brad this fired up. I've also probably never seen South Carolina this close to the playoff.
I think you could directly find on the keyboards from the wear and tear where at SEC official is. They just been typing at SEC official for 2 weeks.
For 2 months. Yeah, 2 months post LSU. I came to the conclusion of I guess I would most want to see South Carolina because of how they've been playing, and I would most want to see Cam Ward and not Miami, just Cam Ward on a field by himself. Restrepo can stay. That's fine, I guess, too. But pretty much nobody else on that Miami team. I don't really feel like Bama earned it. Yet at the same time, I don't feel sympathy for those other teams. You know, I don't.
Yeah, I think the X factor here is just the sympathy, right? And this is a barrage of thoughts. I'm not going to say they're all exactly equal, but you look at 2011. Okay, we have 2 teams in the same conference playing for a championship. You look at 2014, okay, we've got Ohio State jumping the 2 Big 12 teams. You look at 2017, you got Alabama getting in as a 4th spot. You look at last year, with Georgia being left out and Alabama. all an expanded playoff does is give more chance for the biggest brands to get it. I said this at the time. But exactly to your point, I feel less sympathy now because when you're Georgia and you're defending two-time champion and you get left out of a 4 team, it's like, well, you really, you're chasing history here. The cool thing is, all these teams would have been not even close to contenders for 99.9% of college football history. So it's hard for me to be like, oh, Alabama got left in this time. It's like, guys, we knew exactly this was going to happen when these big brands started to be put up against the other teams, and we could individually get into it. Exactly what you just said. We could look at Ole Miss's wins, strength of schedule, South Carolina. Oh, well, they only lost by 2. None of this is always how it was going to be. So at least you could take solace in the fact that the risks or the stakes are not as high this time, and you're not really costing a group of guys who couldn't have done anything a la Florida State last year.
I'm in agreement with that. And I'm usually not that guy, conspiracy theory guy, Danny Cannell guy. I'm usually not that person.
Well, you don't have to be Danny Cannell guy. I'm not going to put that evil on you.
But you know who I'm talking about. This whole thing is rigged. The system's rigged, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. This is one of the first times where I felt like they did break the tie with the brand. And tell me I'm wrong, because I don't really feel like it's that controversial. I don't think really the resumes are that different. And Bama fans, if you tell me that your team absolutely deserved to be in this spot and its resume is so much better than everybody else, tell me how you felt after the Oklahoma game. Because did your opinion drastically change because you beat Auburn? Or did it change because you saw other teams in a similar spot and you felt the need to puff your chest out and pretend that, oh, hey, we'd be favored on neutral field and, oh, we didn't lose to a pair of 6-6 teams? Again, I just want to argue against these teams and not for them. And I also don't really feel that bad for South Carolina, Miami, and Ole Miss. Okay, I just don't. I wanted to mute Lane on Twitter this week, and I'll never actually pull the trigger on doing that because Lane is too good on Twitter. But this is as close as I've ever gotten to want to mute Lane. Beat Kentucky. Don't lose 3 football games. Don't lose that game to Florida when everybody knows that's what you're playing for. You win 2 games. All right, beat 2 teams in the SEC that aren't competing for anything. And you get to go on to the college football playoff. And instead, you spend the entire week crying about it and about how your resume should stack up better just because you beat Georgia by this much. You lost 3 games, okay? You lost 3 games. I rolled my eyes when I saw Mario Cristobal going on every show that would let him go on their show this week and saying like, oh, yeah, look at the ACC compared to blah, blah, blah. You lost 2 of your last 3 games, and you don't have a single win against the current CFP top 25. I don't want to hear from you, okay? And Beamer saying that, oh, I bet nobody would want to face us. He's not wrong, but it also doesn't mean that you should feel slighted just because you shouldn't feel slighted when a Bama team got in that has the same record as you that beats you. It's like, what, that's why I just feel like I was going in circles with this whole thing. And this is the part of the expanded playoff that I hate the most. Okay. And I've been fine with the chaos. I think we're going to be wildly entertained from this. I wasn't one of those people saying we absolutely need to get to 12. I was fine getting to 12. I'm an adapt or die guy. Okay. I try and be as much as possible. But Will, you've done this before. When you move into a house, you made that move from apartment to house at one point. Mm-hmm. It's fun to look on Zillow, right? I mean, how much time did you spend looking on Zillow, or even if you weren't on Zillow, you're looking at other houses in the area and stuff like that, and you're thinking in your head, like, what it'd be like to live in all these different places. Ooh, it'd be fun to be in that neighborhood. Ooh, what's right by this house? What's by that house? And once you're established in your house, you get to enjoy the benefits of having that house, and you get to feel like all those daydreams that you had come to fruition, and you get to kind of see what this life is like. I will go to bat and say that home owning is incredibly rewarding, and there are things that come with it that I absolutely love. I love the fact that I can have this office where I sit here and I talk to all you people, and you get to, if you're watching YouTube, you see my background, you know that this space is designed for that, and that's what we do here. And I love that, we can mount our TV in our living room and put holes in our wall, and that's our choice to be able to do that. I love that I can mow a lawn and I can think about, oh, when was the last time I mowed? I love all the things that come with home owning, okay? I am that guy. But it's the middle part that sucks. Moving is the single worst thing that we as human beings do on a regular basis, trademark pending. Add in the process of making an offer, closing on a house, all the paperwork, all the inspections, all the insurance stuff you have to figure out, all the things that you want to fix immediately after you finally go through the backbreaking process, sometimes literally, of moving your stuff in. After you go through all that and you're still like, man, it feels like our to-do list is a mile long. But once you finally get established, you're like, exhale. we're at that middle place right now with the expanded playoff. And that's kind of just how I feel about being in this position with these bubble teams, with this week of politicking and arguing for these teams that, quite frankly, in any other iteration of college football would not be playing for a national championship. And I realize I need to adapt and I need to adjust my thinking. As you can tell, I'm struggling with it. And I really just didn't feel sorry for these teams as they sat there and argued all week.
Yeah, I'm literally right there with you, man. This is like, I hate to say like open and shut, no controversy, but that's the best. None of these teams would be halfway considered given a snowball's chance in hell before this year. So yeah, I mean, if you're Ole Miss, like don't lose to 3 busted teams. I mean, hey, if you feel like LSU is a good loss, look what they did directly after that game. You know what I'm saying? Like they could have been had. Florida, I understand we're all committed to saying Florida won that game. You dropped a punt because the sun was in your eyes. Like there are so many points in Ole Miss this season. South Carolina, I do feel a little bit better for, or a little bit worse for, but at the same time, yeah, you had a 2-point conversion. I understand the thing about the LSU game. I fully get it, but at the same time, you had the bad loss to Ole Miss. So yeah, to your point, I we can't do the thing as SEC fans because then you're really just telling on yourself and saying you want your team to get in. You want good things for your team because if you're out here advocating against SMU or any of these other like smaller teams, like, oh well, neutral field, we'd be favored on a neutral field. It's like, what was the point? The point of expanding the playoff was not to get 8 SEC teams in; it was to get those teams in. SEC teams could always get in. So yeah, that's kind of my overall thing is how everybody just got on one drum beat. Everybody had their little band leaders of like, we've never done this before, but these are our bullet points, and it was fascinating to see. I'm kind of, to your point, lucky that my team is not in this because I had no interest in playing the please let me in.
Yeah, look, it's going to continue. It's going to be like this every single year, and that's what this year has kind of shown is that there are just going to be teams that you are uneasy talking about as real, actual playoff teams with how devastating some of these losses feel, and that's going to persist as long as the playoff is what it is, and it's never going to get smaller ever again. One other thing that I thought was noteworthy from Tuesday night from an SEC perspective, Tennessee is firmly on the bubble for that first round home game in the playoff.
And another thing too, real quick, look at Tennessee, right? That is a team that handled business, right? That is a team that had their hiccup against Arkansas. They're a team that had what was functionally a schedule loss against Georgia and said, okay, well, we know we got to basically beat Alabama to get in. We know we need to not be on this bubble. So that's what you can do as well. You could not lose to Vandy at the end of the year if you're Tennessee. You can do things to where we're not considering you. So hats off to them because they made it.
And they're going to be in. And that's the good news for Tennessee. You're exactly right. You lost the one dud game, and then you still at least had the one quality win against Bama, and then the Georgia game. Yeah, I mean, you needed some chaos to make sure that you were going to have a chance, and you were fearing that we could be on the outside looking in, but still you kept your head down, you handled your business, and obviously coming back against Vandy, we talked about that on Sunday, how important that was to show that. But the way that this is playing out for the Vols now, their biggest question going into this weekend is what can happen to break right for us again? Because let's be honest, Tennessee got things to break right for them down the stretch in the regular season, and they took advantage of that. I thought Ohio State would stay above Tennessee. That happened despite the Ohio State loss, and the Ohio State loss to Michigan. Tennessee fans argue that Ohio State had a worse loss. Not sure how much worse that loss was when Tennessee lost to a 6-6 Arkansas team. Ohio State also has 2 wins against teams that are 11-1 in the CFP top 10. You can think Penn State's a fraud. You can think Indiana's a fraud. You can't also tell me Alabama's not a fraud and make that case. All right. I get it. And Tennessee just has the 2 wins against FBS teams that have a winning record. That hurt them. And by the way, the other one of those wins that Tennessee has, overtime, 7-5 Florida at home against a team that had a mid-game quarterback injury. So worth remembering.
Aging gracefully, though.
It is. It's aged better. But still, I don't really want to hear like, oh my gosh, our resume is so much better. So if you're a Tennessee fan, here's what you need to know about getting that number 8 seed. That's the line that you want to see on Selection Sunday. Give us that number 8 seed because 5 through 8 have the home playoff games in the first round. Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to stay above you, and they're going to get one of those 4 home playoff spots. Okay, so let's rule out that argument at this point. I think there is a good chance that Georgia could lose to Texas and stay above Tennessee because the Dogs won that game by double digits, and both teams were 10-2 in the regular season. Again, Georgia beat 5 FBS teams with a winning record, 3 of which are in the current CFP top 25. Georgia's one of the few teams that we're not really disputing their resume at this point, even though they obviously have the 2 losses. I also think if Texas loses the SEC championship, it's not going to fall 5 or 6 spots behind Tennessee based on how much love the selection committee has given Texas week after week, even though we have questioned the resume. And by the way, in case you haven't seen, Texas doesn't have a win against a team that is currently in the CFP top 25 because A&M fell out. I don't really think that's going to factor into the selection committee's view of Texas. They just think Texas is good, okay? So I wouldn't bank on that if I'm a Tennessee fan. I'm not sitting there like, oh, man, I hope Georgia just demolishes Texas and then Texas falls a bunch of these spots. So Tennessee fans.
It's going to be hilarious, too. And I know that, like, teams are locked. Like, that was one thing that they tried to hit on, a lot, is that if you're locked, it's pretty hard to move up, like, if you're not playing. But I will say it would be very funny if Georgia does lose the SEC championship game and they're comparing your resume with, like, an Ohio State. It's like, now suddenly that Michigan game matters.
Yeah, maybe that would. And who knows? I think they would still be in the same spot where I think Georgia and Ohio State would both be hosting home playoff games. But yeah, that would all of a sudden be a question that they would have to ask. I think Georgia would get the benefit of the doubt, though, based on the fact that they are still in that spot right now, and maybe a loss would punish them. I don't know. This is what Tennessee fans need. You need Oregon to destroy Penn State. That's
easy thing to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, look, crazier things have happened. Okay, you need Oregon to make this a Big Ten championship game in which everyone is pointing and laughing at James Franklin and the fact that he is 3-18 against AP top 10 teams at Penn State with just one such victory in the last 8 seasons, and it was a Rose Bowl in which Cam Rising got hurt. You remember how that played out. If Oregon destroys Penn State, suddenly you're comparing 2 loss resumes with Tennessee, and I think the Vols would have that advantage. Now, maybe it's similar to the situation we just talked about with Texas, right? Where they have continued to just say, well, we think Penn State is good, and we're just going to rank them higher, even though they don't have the quality wins. Their best win right now is against number 21 Illinois, and that was a dogfight. Second best win, 7-5 Minnesota, another dogfight. If Oregon destroys Penn State, we know that Penn State would definitely fall behind Ohio State. I think they would. And maybe the seeds 5 through 8 would be Notre Dame, Ohio State, the SEC championship loser, and Tennessee. I think that's the most likely path for the Vols to get that home playoff game in the first round. And maybe that's not even enough. And that's why they were so passionately arguing for a ranking ahead of Ohio State, knowing that Notre Dame can't have one of those top 4 seeds. They are locked in to a home playoff game in the first round. So that's kind of how I see this playing out. Any other playoff thoughts that kind of came to mind? Rankings, non-rankings, anything that's come up for you that you've been wondering about this week?
I will say to that point too, like that might be one of the situations where that locked team can have some movement with Penn State losing the Big Ten championship game badly. Because if you're Ohio State, you're like, well, we beat these guys.
Yeah, and that's not falling out of the field. That's just that's different with seeding as opposed to like being told you can't make the field.
Yeah, for sure. And just the one thing they've tried to cling to is, well, you're not going to get hopped if you don't play. You know what I'm saying? But in that situation, it's kind of like, well, or you're not going to have a team that doesn't play hop another team. But in that situation, it is pretty clear. Like, hey, the book is kind of out on James Franklin. Like, if they get smoked in another one of these big games, the same kind of which they lost to Ohio State to even put themselves in this position, you'd be like, hey, not that Ryan Day is some championship stalwart, but I'd probably take him there, as weird as that is. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I hate to ever feel bad for Miami fans because the amount of like vibes that they've been writing for 20 years, but that was a flawed team. I thought they would come apart down the stretch. I didn't think that it would be that kind of heartbreaking, but it's always how it goes for that fan base. So they can at least feel like they're building something good.
I don't know, man. But yeah, I disagree with that. I think this is a massive missed opportunity for Mario. And we talked about it with Bear Felica. I think that's why he's so passionately been fighting this drop. This is such a Miami hasn't had a quarterback like this in the 21st century. And he's gone. He was a one and done. You knew he was a one and done.
Mhm.
The schedule couldn't have lined up better for Miami in the regular season. You had the expanded playoff. You had 12 teams to get in. You had an ACC championship that was supposed to be wide open. SMU was the team that ran the table in your conference. Clemson isn't what it used to be. This was your opportunity, and you whiffed. And you whiffed because you couldn't beat Syracuse. Let's call it like I don't know that they're and that's the other thing too. We might get a difference in the way that college football rosters are constructed and all that stuff too, with the revenue sharing and all that. But Mario Cristobal going back to those boosters, being like, "Hey, same thing that we talked about with Lane. Is that going to be a tougher sell to say just give me this money and I promise I can take you to that next level?" You still couldn't get to an ACC championship. You still couldn't get to the college football playoff. I think this is a huge missed window. Maybe not as drastic as Florida State last year. But man, this is going to sting Miami fans for a long time.
Yeah, and remember, I'm always very relative with things. So with Miami, okay, you're scamming boosters less than anyone has in the last 20 years. If you come back and say, "Hey, we won all these games,"
ironic,
we got a guy in the Heisman
very ironic with the Nevin
yeah,
Shapiro.
we didn't win.
Yeah,
but no facts. It's like, hey, like honestly. This is the best recruiting pitch because it does feel like they're kind of close. Whereas like last year, they couldn't snap the football against Georgia Tech. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, not that I'm giving Mario any Coach of the Year love, but we were genuinely questioning, and I heard Miami fans being like, do they need to hire like 2 Coach O-style coordinators and just get Mario off the sideline because he's so inept as a coach? So, they have money. They have like a place to go after this as far as the ACC is not getting any better. They have more money than God. Their boosters have been cool with getting scammed for 20 years. They're cool with scamming the tax codes, to your point. So, yeah, I think this is still a great season for Miami, even if it didn't end great. I don't know if there really is like another heartbreak team for sure. Again, maybe we could argue Ole Miss, but like they've already the Hayes in the barn. Alabama got a pretty good draw. I think Georgia is happy to have beaten Georgia Tech. So, yeah, I really don't think there's any like real heartbreaker situations as far as teams that got hot late or whatever, like even like a Florida or South Carolina, I would hope that they understand why they're here.
Yeah, Miami's the one that stands out. Miami and Ole Miss are the two that stand out totally with the spending in the portal and then just not having it result in that playoff berth. Just a crushing end result for both of those teams in the regular season. Only other thing probably worth bringing up, Boise State potentially getting a 3 seed is quite possibly one of the funniest things ever if that ends up happening.
They still can't get the one or the two.
They can't get the one or the two. That's not going to happen because the SEC and Big Ten champs will covet that. But like,
remember when they stuck them with that like Sugar Bowl or whatever with TCU in 2010? It was like Andy Dalton. It was like, well, you guys are the 2 teams that should be playing, but here you go. And they had like this all-time classic game that feels like that, except they actually play for a championship.
It's very weird to process that because it's not like they would be competing for a top 4 seed in the college football playoff if it were the previous system. But just to think that Boise State could be getting a 3 seed. And I think if Boise State beats UNLV and Clemson wins, like that's what ends up happening. Clemson's not all of a sudden going to leapfrog all, I mean, maybe Clemson wouldn't have any sort of chance at the 3 seed. So they're still sitting in a really, really nice spot to get the 4 seed because number 15 Arizona State, they're 5 spots behind Boise State. And they're only facing number 16 Iowa State. Don't ask what's going on with those ADs at Iowa State. I mean, goodness gracious. That in SMU, that whole deal. So I think the Big 12 winner is only getting a first round bye unless UNLV beats Boise State, which I wouldn't rule out the Fighting Barry Odoms. I would not rule them out. Barry Odom in a college football playoff game. How funny would that be? But anyway, should be an awesome conference championship weekend. I think the more intrigue on Sunday will be based in the seeding and how that's going to shake out with home playoff berths and stuff like that. What do those first round matchups look like? That's going to be why people are going to tune in more so than who is actually in the field, who is not, unless of course SMU loses to Clemson and we're all sitting there wondering, oh my God, are they really about to drop SMU below Bama and put Bama into this field? That will be the only real intrigue.
Actually, Bama, you've been awarded a home playoff game. Congratulations. Wait, what do we do to deserve?
Yeah. Did you just say like you weren't going to move up idle teams based on that? You weren't going to shuffle them all of a sudden that their hay is in the barn. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it though. It should be really, really interesting. We will be recording on Sunday after the ranking show. So that'll be a little bit of a later Sunday drop than usual. If you're one of those people that listens to us in the middle of Sunday afternoon, as opposed to Monday morning or something like that, just be mindful of that. that pod will be coming out a bit later than it normally does. All right, let's talk about that game in Atlanta, Will. SEC Championship.
Let's do it.
Number 2, Texas. 2.5 point favorites. How about that? Number 5, Georgia. The over-under is 1 Georgia scoring drive of 35 yards. How about that?
Okay.
Last time these teams played, that's what Georgia had. 1 scoring drive of 35 yards. Georgia scored 30 points when it had 1 scoring drive of 35 yards. Granted, one drive that was at least 35 yards. It was the biggest drive of the game. It was an 11-play, 89-yard drive in the fourth quarter, right after Texas had made it a 1-score game. Fans are throwing trash in the field. You get it. You remember that. But that's your reminder of 2 things. One, the Texas defense played really, really well that night, despite what the 30 points suggested. Technically their worst defensive game of the year from just a scoreboard standpoint. And we're going to get to the Carson Beck.
This was an all-time like top tier team matchup, because to your point, and like we keyed on this at the time, this is no breaking news, but both offenses were pretty comfortably not good that day, but both defenses were so Super Saiyan amazing, and Georgia's obviously was a 12 out of 10 and Texas's was a 10 out of 10. But this is one of the as a precedent, like this is for sure a game that would be good to get another of, because the odds of exactly that happening again are so
I mean, Georgia winning a game like that where Carson Beck is that bad, it's extremely unique. I mean, again, getting to 30 points with 1 scoring drive of more than 35 yards is, or of at least 35 yards. They had a drive that was 34 yards. That's why I set it at 35. That's the way that always works. Georgia repeating that, you're right, seems next to impossible. But what's clear is that both teams have adjustments to make in this one. Even that Georgia defense, in my opinion, has to adjust for the possibility of an arch package. Remember, we talked about this the other day. Sark showing that on 4th down at Texas A&M, getting a positive result on that play, a touchdown run from Arch. That sent a loud message. Brilliant move.
You know what? With one play, he graduated from sneaky athleticism, didn't he? Because that dude's a freak.
Arch is faster than he gets credit for. Why do you say that?
Oh, no. Yeah, exactly. But like every competition where he's got sneaky athleticism. No, that dude can go. Like that is a dual threat. I was joking with somebody. It's like, this is more of like Archie and Cooper's son than like Peyton and Eli's son. This guy's got some burns on him.
I think Arch is in the same category as Jackson Arnold. Sneaky, faster than he gets credit. Brock Vandegrift, Garrett Nussmeier, Carson Beck, faster than he gets credit for. Just not sure why I picked those guys, but yeah, if you're Kirby Smart, you know as well as anyone on the face of this earth that backup quarterbacks, they have magical powers against your defense in that building. They do. Everybody's aware of that. You would see a different type of offense if Arch took over for Texas, or even not take over, but if he was just given a series. We know that. And I don't expect that the Georgia defense will come out there and assume that it's going to be a repeat of this first matchup. They will be waiting for what those Sark adjustments are. I expect those Texas protections to be better. I don't know that Kelvin Banks Jr., the future first-round pick, I don't know if he's going to be a full go after he went down and did not return in the A&M game. The good news for Texas is that redshirt freshman Trevor Gooseby, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. I didn't want to just trust Fowler on that one, sadly. Gooseby. Both. We got our bases covered. He stepped in. He played really, really well against that respected A&M front that we have given a lot of love to this season. The other good news, Banks, last game against Georgia didn't go so hot. I said afterwards, I think he should sue Georgia because they just took money out of his bank account for what they did to that poor guy. And he was kind of part of the problem with everything that Jalen Walker and Mikael Williams coming off injury, what they were able to do to disrupt Quinn Ewers that night. Could Banks also be part of the solution in this game? I wouldn't rule that out. We know that the Texas offensive line has benefited greatly from continuity this season. That's going to be such an important thing as you look at playoff success. Which one of these groups has had continuity on the offensive line? We also know that Georgia game was the first time we really saw a chink in the armor. It was the first time probably that there was a negative thing on a broadcast said about the Texas offensive line. If history repeats itself, and Glenn Schumann dials up all these perfect pressure packages again, I don't think anybody's going to be stunned. but I just cannot imagine for the life of me with how much I think Steve Sarkisian just eats, sleeps, and breathes this stuff. I can't imagine Sark will not have some sort of adjustment to make to account for that. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to this game. I think it's a lot. I think more yes than no for sure. Like, yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect, and I'm not saying that all of a sudden it's going to be a repeat of what Texas just did against Texas A&M, where I thought that protection could not have been much better. But I just can't imagine it's going to be as overwhelming as it was. Georgia had what, 10 TFL, 7 sacks that game. I mean, it was so unbelievably one-sided. Texas has to get Trey Wisner a healthy workload for the third consecutive game. He's never had to handle that at any point in his young career. Of course, we talked about that's not how he's been used, at least coming into this season, and the running back depth issues with injuries and whatnot. That, of course, opened the door for Wisner, who's become a really reliable player for them. Good running game is how you slow down that pass rush. I've heard it a million times before. You don't need to hear me say that. Get him on those draws, get him on those delayed handoffs, and see what that can do for you early on. Sark likes to do that window dressing pre-snap. Occasionally they'll use Wisner as a decoy. They'll do like an end around to Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo. Maybe they'll line up Jaden Blue out wide. They'll do stuff like that. Speaking of Jaden Blue, he played just 16 snaps against A&M because Wisner has really turned into the bell cow back for Sark. And Georgia, really, if you're going to be sloppy with tackling, Wisner is a bad guy to miss tackles against. He is so freaking slippery. And I think that's going to be a brutal task for Georgia if they get him going early. Jaden Blue had 0 carries the first time that these two teams played, and he was out there for a season-low 2 run plays compared to 29 passing snaps, and he had a team-high 7 catches in this first matchup against Georgia. Do you run some wheel route stuff with him? And do you try and do that in a way that Georgia Tech, I thought, could take advantage of? Probably. What adjustments can Sark make? That's probably been eating at him all week. I think he'd ideally like to kind of save Wisner for being able to carry the football and not worry about him as a pass protector, which he's only done 33 times in 12 games. If I'm Sark, I'm probably thinking, look, if our All-American left tackle can't handle Jalen Walker and Micah Williams, I'm sure as hell not going to expect our running back to be able to pass pro against that. And that's going to be a reliable last line of defense. I would rather have him out there or have Blue out there, give an extra weapon for our guy to be able to get the ball to get the ball to in some space and try and combat that pass rush. That seems like a much better plan.
I would love to see all the tape of genuinely, this isn't even me assuming anything, but I would love to see the tape of coaches putting in their blocking running back and him just sizing a guy up and delivering a block that for sure saved their quarterback a sack. Because I feel like I hear that all the time from coaches, and I very rarely see that running back really get in the hole and do something above replacement value.
Yeah, and when you see it, it stands out. And it's almost like, oh, wow, that running back held up really, really well. Wow, they just kind of blew up. They had an edge rusher, and they just kind of handed him his lunch. That doesn't happen very often. I don't know that you're going to expect to do that against Georgia. I don't think that's very, very likely that those guys will be stopped with a head of steam. What seems inevitable is that Texas will run the football more than it did last time, when obviously game flow was working against that in the things that they have wanted to do with this offense this year. With Ewers' mobility probably still not at full go. He looked good against Texas A&M, but he's still not the most mobile guy, even at 100%. You can't afford to let this Georgia pass rush pin its ears back. If this is a repeat of last time's start, I don't think Sark is going to bank on Quinn Ewers figuring it out. I think we would see Arch. I really do. I think if this is a bad quarter and a half, and it's just man, they're sitting there with 3 points. Georgia's up 14-3. Texas's offense is stuck in the mud. I think we would see him turn to Arch for the rest of the game. Sark knows that this game is going to come down to adjustments, and that one would be the ultimate adjustment, but it's one that I think he's definitely preparing for. And I think at this point you have to, and it's not necessarily an indictment of Ewers. It's just understanding that sometimes you can go into a plan thinking, I'm going to be fastball heavy today, and I'm going to live on that outside part of the plate. and then the first 3 hitters take you the opposite way and put 2 off the wall and then drive. They got 3 all of a sudden. They got 3 in the first inning, and you're like, well, that game plan is out the window. I got to be able to adjust. That can happen. That can happen for this Texas offense, and maybe they do turn to Arch. Can we talk about Carson Beck for a sec here?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think, and you had a different perspective of this one, of tuning in when you did. You're out to dinner with your mom for her birthday, and then you flipped on the game when Carson Beck kind of figured things out against Georgia Tech and looked much better.
I don't know if I told you this story. When I watched the Super Bowl, the Falcons blew. I never watched the Falcons succeed. I came home and only watched them blow it. It was like the opposite of that.
28-3. Good time to start watching that game. Sorry, Falcon fans, you didn't deserve that. I didn't choose violence today. I promise. I got no ill will against you guys. I don't think that he was great against Georgia Tech. And obviously his receivers didn't help him out. That continues to be a major, major problem. They were better down the stretch. But still, too many moments in that game where you're like, oh, my God, what is he throwing to? The moment with Tate Ratledge pulling Carson Beck aside and kind of getting in his ear, being like, man, you got to lock in right now. You got to figure this out. I would love to know what that conversation was like verbatim. But ESPN did a great job of kind of capturing that. And it felt like a turning point. It felt really important for Carson Beck. I'll say this. Regardless of how well you thought he played that day, the key was that 0 interceptions. None. Couldn't have a back-breaking interception when you're trying to pull off that furious comeback late. Carson Beck is currently riding a streak of 118 consecutive passes without an interception, dating back to the Ole Miss game. That is the longest stretch without an interception of his career. That's good. We know what the issue was in this game against Texas and what prevented Georgia from winning this 42-7. Kind of Carson Beck. It really was. And those, obviously, the Georgia pass catchers gave him no help whatsoever. It would be thoroughly impressive if that interceptionless streak continues against this Texas defense. And remember, this was a Trevor Etienne game the first time. He had all 3 of those Georgia touchdowns. Etienne's not looking like he's going to be back until at least the playoff. TBD on his status, still dealing with the rib injury. Don't expect all of a sudden him to pull a Willis Reed in this game or anything like that. And Texas will not have to prepare for him, I would assume at least. This should be a big Nate Frazier, run-heavy game plan for Mike Bobo. Get those backs involved. The biggest mismatch of this game, maybe you'll disagree with this, I think the biggest mismatch of this game is the Georgia receivers against that Texas secondary. Kind of hard to argue against that. The way that Taft has stepped up too, Anthony Hill Jr. can cover. Like they have so many different guys that just, and they don't miss those tackles in space. So if you want to do those quick hitters like Bobo loves to do, where it's kind of just an extended run play, you're getting the receiver out. It's, and Texas will do that a lot too. It's been very well documented how much they like to throw behind the line of scrimmage, but that's just not been an area where you're really going to get Texas. And they're a more sure-handed tackling team. And it's because those guys in the secondary can break down and they can tackle. And they're not afraid of that contact. And they cover in space really well.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I think that, if you look at the things that Georgia did well against Georgia Tech, the question is, what can you find in that? And the answer is if Cass Jones is the leading receiver in this game, Texas has stepped on a rig.
Maybe.
Something has gone terrible for Texas, and so point being, it might be good to your point, like maybe everybody shut down, but Arian Smith, not a great day at the office. Love it at the pair of touchdowns, also a fumble. So these, we've said since the beginning of the season, these outside players for Georgia are not going to be a difference maker. They just have not. I think they just do not have the Jimmies and Joes for it. I think more of your interior up back style guys, talking about some of the tight ends, Delp, those type of guys. It feels like Lucky. Like it feels like it's like anybody can get you the yards in an amalgamation. But when you're looking at a Carson Beck who went from a turnover machine for kind of, let's call it the middle, 2/5 of the season, whichever one that would be, then going to here is to say, okay, well, he had 5 tutties, no turnovers in that game, did have a fumble, didn't lose it, right? You would hope that if I told you that happened against Texas, that feels like a pretty easy Georgia win. But it feels like at the same time, Georgia Tech was giving up those underneath routes. They were fine to shut down Texas's receivers for most of the game, right? There was no, obviously, like I said, Lovett got his here and there. But I think if you want the ability to go back and forth with Texas, who, their quarterback has not been healthy all year, does not have great arm strength. Well, guess what? They've known that since week 4. I'm saying they've known that the whole year. So they're still able to get chunk plays. They're still able to do end rounds, jet sweeps, even, break off some run plays. And yeah, I would also say like the Georgia run game as well. I would love to see how they'd match up with PK's defense. And just like looking at it here, there's only been twice this year that Texas has given up 20 or more points. It was in their loss to Georgia, obviously, and then against Vandy. Can't ever sleep on Diego Pavia. But that's the thing. If Georgia can consistently run the ball, all that stuff becomes a lot easier. But they haven't been able to figure that out pretty much all year, So it's the classic. If Georgia could run the ball, things would be different. They could kind of bait and switch those offensive kind of up backs, get them wide open in the middle of the field because guys are getting committed. But one of them has to happen. They either need to run the ball or hit explosive plays down.
Exactly. Because I think the idea of Bobo assuming Carson Beck can throw 40 times and have like what he did against Georgia Tech, I don't think you're going to repeat that. I think that this Texas secondary is too good. They're the ones that believe more in the tips and overthrows. Got to get those. That's Georgia's mantra. Texas is the one that subscribes to that. They're the ones that have a 4 to 18 TD to INT ratio this year. And so, what does that mean? What game plan does Bobo come out with if it's tough sledding going on in the running game? Does that mean you're seeing more of the Cass Jones, who, by the way, is really only playing on passing downs? He's playing a lot more. You finally get Roderick Robinson back at your disposal for week 14, which was really nice to be able to see him out there for 28 snaps against Georgia Tech in an 8 overtime marathon. You needed that guy on a day in which you were already without ETN, of course. So I don't know. It's a trickier offensive game plan for Bobo than I think the average person would assume, because we know how this can play out. You can go into this and say, well, yeah, run the football, establish the run, trust Nate Frazier, trust that these guys are going to be able to open up holes for you. What happens if it's 2 yards in a cloud of dust and you're not going anywhere and you're stuck in the mud? Because these Texas defensive tackles, even a post-Sweat Murphy era, are still really freaking good. And I don't want to run it Alfred Collins.
And the defense has gotten better since last year.
It has.
I just think straight up the defense has gotten better since last year, because you had those guys in the middle, but to your point, the back end is improving. It's not just, okay, you can't run up the A gap, but you can do other stuff. It's, okay, we hopefully think we can't. Oh, we can't do anything, and this is gone, and this is gone, and the middle is good. So, yeah, this is one of the most complete defenses I think I've ever seen.
It's loaded, man. It's absolutely loaded. And it's going to be a really difficult test because they have just essentially made teams play with their left hand all season. And that's a hard thing to do. And it'll be a hard thing to do against Georgia with the talent that they still have. But, I just think that this is a really interesting psychological game that Georgia's going to have to play, because I think you got to be patient against Texas. If you're just getting those 2 yards and 3 yards, you kind of got to be willing to get this game into the mud. Texas is comfortable winning a game like that. Georgia should be comfortable winning a game like that too, because they keep getting off to all these slow starts. Carson Beck's not even in the top 100 in FBS in first half quarterback rating. Think about that. Not in the top 100 in that. That's how slow this team has started this year. You have to be willing to be like, yeah, if it gets to 7-3 at halftime and we still have a puncher's chance, I've seen us come back in games. I'm not going to be scared of that deficit. I'm not all of a sudden going to be like, oh my God, we need to start hitting these 15, 20-yard pass plays downfield. Ideally, you'd love to be able to go over the top. Do I want to trust those matchups every single time? I don't, because I don't really trust Georgia's receivers. I don't trust them to win those one-on-ones. You trust your quarterback to be able to hit some of these guys in zone coverage, find some of those soft spots. When you do have those big throwing windows, that's when you need to be able to take advantage of that. So the question I keep asking, can Georgia be patient enough to grind out a win against this Texas team in a way that it didn't really have to last time, because its defense played with its hair on fire and won of that game? I think yes. I'm saying that a team in burnt orange doesn't quite have the same effect on Kirby Smart as a team in crimson. I'm saying that Georgia comes out swinging, maybe not swinging as hard as it did last time on the defensive side of the ball. Texas gets up off the mat after it looks like a first-round knockout again. Maybe it's 14-3, Georgia's up early or something like that, and Texas can't really get anything going on offense. I think Texas makes this a 60-minute game, but the poise of Carson Beck in those crucial spots makes a difference. Texas can't get the ball back after it pulls within 6 and this becomes a game. Georgia finds a way to win 27-21, the most roundabout SEC title winner since 2007 LSU. That would be the first time we've had an SEC champion with multiple regular season losses since 2007 LSU. Fun fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wild year. Yeah, I'm there with you in terms of, you know, I think that the last game plan is not replicable. To your point, in that reality, okay, how many series for Arch you think?
Gosh, game flow is gonna determine this. I think there's
Because if they get down 14-3, I feel like that's about the time. You already got 2 or 3 drives out
yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just preach patience for Georgia, and I think Texas is kind of the opposite. I think you kind of need to have that sense of urgency.
Pull the
Yeah,
plug.
pull the plug. Be willing to make that adjustment on the fly, despite the fact that you were gotten off
Be
to slow
standing there
starts.
with that long the crook, the sheep's Bo Peep thing that they use to pull people off stage. Weed Stark with a giant one of those. Okay, Ewers throws his second bad pick. We see the crook come out, pull him in. No,
Yeah.
sir, Arch
Be
Manning.
gentle with yours, though. Don't pull too hard on it. You know, he had the rib injury. He's got the ankle. You know, just be careful. Yeah, look, I think that we see one by design. I think we see it on like the third series, maybe the third series of this game for Texas, independent of game flow. I think that's in the design, and then everything from that point is dependent on what kind of success rate they're having on the offensive side of the ball. How comfortable does Ewers look? Does this offensive line look like it's overmatched? And oh my God, you can't have Ewers out there with a limited ankle when George is winning these battles up front. We absolutely need to get Arch out there. I think one by design in that third series, and then they'll kind of make those adjustments from there.
Yeah, I'm actually right there with you. And that was what I started to say whenever you were initially talking about it. It's like it almost feels like no matter what, we're going to see some Arch in about the third series. Because let's say they come out there and Ewers is cooking, it would still behoove them to get that extra look out there and make the defense. Yeah.
And you could argue, oh, maybe that's going to take Ewers out of a rhythm. Why would you do something like that? Yeah, there's a case. We play the results with that. That's how that works. But if that's going to be the approach, Texas knows that. Texas knows that in the game plan. That's not all of a sudden going to be Arch going in for Ewers and Ewers is taken aback by it. He's going to know if that's the plan. Hey, you might get into a nice rhythm, but this is our offensive game plan early on. We struggled so much to move the football against these guys last time. We just want to kind of keep them guessing a little bit. And I was looking at Ewers' body language when Arch came in for that fourth down play, and he was hype. He was all about it. And for those who are wondering about that sort of dynamic and how does that impact this Texas team, they might be doing this at just the right time if they're able to do this successfully. And obviously, if Arch comes in and throws a duck and throws a pick when Ewers has been looking great, everybody's going to say, why did Sark make that move? You can't take out Ewers in that spot. And of course, we will play the results. But I think there's a lot to be gained from it. And I think that whatever you can do to keep this defense off balance after how historically dominant they were last time, you got to pull out all the stops if you're Sark, and I bet he will.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to both sides really like controlling the football. So to your point, like I would rather see Beck have, pass attempts in the early 30s, like low 30s or high 20s, because when you think about what a pass attempt equates to, okay, really it's about pass attempts under duress, okay, i.e., let's try to not get him out there with a Texas defender in his face. Let's not get him throwing the ball on a slant route to, Dom Lovett, who is covered, but he's trying to get his guy to make a play. Georgia at this point, to your point about Texas, they don't have receivers that are going to win a ton of one-on-one plays, right? So maybe if you had, I don't know, like Luther Burden out there, and you were like, hey, you know what? We're just going to throw the ball 40 times, and we're going to throw 10 of them to Luther Burden, a la Ryan Williams, and whatever he comes down with, this is what he comes down with. I don't really think there's an outcome or a target or a skills player for Georgia that requires you to force the ball anywhere. So I would rather Georgia dink and dunk down the field. And I hate to go back to 3 yards of cloud of dust because that was where I started this whole conversation about Bobo. But in reality, they need to do that more. I've said that since the Alabama game. It's that you got to trust your run game to open up those holes, because if the defense is keying in on Carson Beck and your whole offense looks like, okay, we're going to do some stuff outside, we're going to do some window dressing, some end arounds, we're going to try to spring these guys open. Well, if you're in a position where your guys are fumbling the ball, dropping passes, even if you get that look you're looking for, it may not work out for you, and then the defense has seen something. So point being, and on the other side of that, I will say, I don't think either of us at this point in this job would be, I hate to say dumb enough because you may not agree with me, but we would be cautious enough to say it's impossible for Georgia to come out and just belt to butt again. You know, like it might, because it didn't make sense the first time. Maybe Georgia just comes out there and are overwhelming. Maybe Kirby, this was all part of his master plan against Georgia Tech. They struggled. Now they have all the good plays, whatever. But I do think, you know, we're going to know pretty easy, pretty early. I'm gonna flip your pick where I say that, like, I think that, yeah, there's a comeback in this game. But I think that we're going to know what we need to know from Georgia pretty early. I think that, you know, if it's Carson Beck that's throwing picks or making bad reads, if it's an offense that seems sleepy and like they're going to try to out-talent people, you can't out-talent Texas. On the other side of it, you know, I do like the lever that Texas can pull. So as far as Arch Manning, as far as the running back stable, as far as the different amount of targets they can hit. If one guy has a bad day, you can hit a couple of guys. So I'll say let's go 31-24 Texas for me. And we can be on opposite sides.
Kind of like they were on opposite sides. I went back and forth all week. My early lean was Texas. The closer I got to Saturday, I thought, you know, if I pick against Georgia, Texas is a guaranteed. Like, if I pick against Georgia, Georgia's winning this game by 4 touchdowns, and I'm eating it on Sunday. So I suppose Georgia fans probably wouldn't want me picking for their team, but I just can't shake this notion that Georgia just did things to frustrate Texas, and I don't think any other team that Texas has faced this year was able to do exactly that. But I hope it's a good one.
They have that dog in them. Like, it's that simple. Like, yeah, I could go through schematically. I could go through what they did. But again, as we saw on the offensive side of the ball for Georgia, it wasn't like they were hitting on everything. They just had that dog in them. And when you can't quantify that, it's like the opposite of the Dak Prescott thing. It's like, I know when I'm watching Dak Prescott in a big game, he's going to implode. I know that when Georgia's back's against the wall, like we saw last Saturday, they're going to play really well. So I'm definitely not discounting that. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. It's just at some point, Georgia's got to die. And I do want to ask you this one question. Don't want to get too deep into it, but you know, my little pet projects here. If Georgia were to win this game, what do you think the likelihood would be that they see each other a third time this season?
I predicted it preseason. I'm sticking with it. I was looking at the seedings too. It might not even be the last time that these two teams play each other in this building, because there's 2 more times that Mercedes-Benz is hosting a postseason game, because they're getting the quarterfinal matchup, and then they get the national championship. So in theory, they could play again in that setting. I was looking at it from a first round matchup standpoint. It's not very likely. It's not particularly likely in a quarterfinal either, but a semifinal or a national championship, it could in theory happen. I'm gonna say there's a good chance.
That'd be crazy.
I'm gonna say there's a good chance. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna say that these teams are gonna play 3 times. I said that they're gonna play regular season, SEC championship, national championship. So yeah, why would I back out now? Of course not. Yeah, we're going to stick with that one.
Love it.
Yeah. Arch Manning, SEC championship, MVP. Those odds, I don't know. I haven't looked at those odds. That'd be a fascinating one to dig into. Probably not going to get enough reps to be able to warrant that. But if Texas pulls off a comeback, who knows? Should be an awesome game on Saturday. We will have full coverage, SaturdayDownSouth.com. We'll do our SEC championship recap with that Sunday pod, post-playoff ranking show. We'll kind of just do a recap of the game and everything that played out from it as well. I will be there in Atlanta on Saturday. Looking forward to seeing a lot of people, getting to see my guys Perry and Candler. I think Marler's going to be there as well. It'll be a very, very good time. All right, this guy, not going to be there in Atlanta, just like you, unfortunately. Matt Hayes, great to be able to catch up with him. Got to be able to talk about the playoff and kind of what's going to happen with the future of that, with expansion, what's going to happen at Ohio State, little coaching carousel discussion. He gave us an SEC championship prediction at the end as well. So here's Matt. Now excited to be joined by a very, very special guest. It is dear friend, Matt Hayes, one of my favorites. I miss you, man. I miss you at SDS. It's a bummer not having your stuff. Your reads are absolute must for anybody who loves college football, and I'm happy or whatever that you're doing great things, USA Today, and still get to hear you every once in a while on 1010XL. But I miss you, man. It's good to see you.
I miss you too, bro. Good to be on with you. Good to talk to you. Very happy. Everything's going great. I'm sure everything's going great with you. I read you all the time too. You're awesome. Love you guys there at SDS.
Now I feel really sentimental and really, really sad. Look, me and C, right? We would go back and forth talking, different ideas and stuff. And hey, what are you guys hitting this week? And Matt would come up with these headlines that were like 4 sentences long, and I loved them. And they were always like, "Oh yeah, that's a really good idea. I should do something like that too." All right, Yeah. Let's look at some of these storylines that I think have been discussed a lot at the end of this college football regular season, and even just the playoff rankings that came out on Tuesday night. Everybody's mad about them, and I kind of did my piece on this. I don't really feel like banging the drum for anybody at this point, and I don't know how you reacted to those rankings. I'm sure your guy Leon Searcy is quite upset with the way that those rankings played out. But what was your takeaway from seeing it?
The Syracuse game is what he's more upset with.
As he should be, because Miami blew it too. You know, it's everybody has blown it at some point this season. It's just, when did you blow it? But what was your reaction to seeing those rankings on Tuesday night?
Yeah, it's kind of very similar to my reactions almost every week, man. I don't know what this committee's doing. No one knows what this committee's doing. For some reason, there's a value on wins, no matter who your wins are against. And I've been saying this for now a month, Connor. What do people see in Penn State? I don't get it. I just don't get it. And that's beyond the whole Indiana thing, which is a charade, which is
whoa.
Farce, okay?
Let's pump the brakes on that. Let's get back to Penn State, man.
I know you're not going to like that, all right? But I'm just telling you right now, man.
You're right.
They literally played no one. Everyone in their schedule, other than Ohio State, has at least 5 losses.
Yep.
I mean, you cannot sit there and tell me that, okay, well, they won 11 games. And here's the problem, too. You've got 4 former coaches in that committee, okay? 4 big personalities. Coaches have big personalities, okay? And I can guarantee you those 4 coaches are going, because they talk. I've gone through these, I went through one of the original, whatever you want to call them, you go down there and they show you what it's like, and you're in the room and you see it. And
the mock selection process.
Whatever you want to call it, right. They call it mock. I don't know whatever it is. So if you have a big personality in that room, and if you've got 4 former coaches who pretty good coaches too, that are telling you that, hey, winning games is big. I don't care who you're beating. If you win 11 games, that's something. And it's just not realistic, because guess what? Liberty was 12-0 last year. Army's a game away from winning 11 games. And you can tell me, well, the schedule's different. The schedule's completely different what Indiana's playing. Okay, and then I'm going to come back to you with this. Well, guess what? The schedule those SEC teams are playing is a lot different than what the Indiana team's playing too. So you can't have it both ways, all right? That's kind of my point with not only Indiana, but Penn State as well. Look, Indiana played 1 game of significance, lost by 23. Penn State has played 1 game of significance, lost at home, had 4 shots from the 3 and couldn't get the ball in the end zone. So and not only that, you watch Indiana, I think you can say, all right, well, they sure look good, and they do. I'm not disagreeing with them. Offensively, they're fantastic. I love Curt Cignetti. I think he's a terrific coach. I love the fact that he said, you know what, screw it. We're going to take the core of this JMU team that, oh, by the way, started the season 11-0 or 10-0 and lost a game. We're going to take the core of this team. We're going to go to Indiana, and we're going to throw it all over the park. And I love that. And I love that he did that, and I love what they've done. I think it's fantastic. But that doesn't automatically mean, all right, let's throw them in the playoff. So I look at them, specifically Penn State. Like, what has Penn State done to make you think, all right, yeah, that's the number 3 team in the country? The number 3 team in the country?
Matt, they're 60 minutes from getting a 1 seed.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yes. They're
How
60 minutes from like Dylan Gabriel imploding and throwing 3 or 4 picks and being the number 1 seed. Right.
That's hilarious.
Kind of crazy. Right. So that's kind of my whole thing with this. And I think the biggest problem, honestly, Connor, is it's almost like we have not learned from the past. It's always, well, they won, so they'll move up from number 6 to number 4. Well, they lost, so they're going to move from number 5 to number 8. It's always this slotting thing. That was the biggest problem of all forever, and the exact reason why we went to the playoff, because we were tired of slotting, of teams moving up and down, and well, you got to move them here because they beat this team. No, at the very least, the playoff is a situation where you say, all right, let's take the totality of what's going on, okay, and the big wins, and deal with the losses. Losses are not a bad thing. I don't understand where losses have become a bad thing, unless it's you got blown out, or unless it's you've been upset by a team that was a 25-point underdog. That's a bad loss. But you can also make up for those bad losses with, I don't know, 3 wins against the current top 25. Yeah, you can do that. I think it's fair to say that. So if you don't like the Indiana loss by 23 at Ohio State, what's the makeup?
I
You
agree
don't
with
like
that.
Penn State's loss at home to Ohio State. What's the makeup game? There is none.
Yeah, and that's why Georgia is going to continue to get the benefit of the doubt as that 2-loss team, because the schedule is unbelievably difficult.
Yeah.
I would argue Bama's got 2 bad losses, and the Vandy loss isn't as bad as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the Oklahoma loss is terrible. It's
Terrible.
absolutely terrible, given the circumstances, given what you should have been playing for. It's a really, really bad loss. I think everybody in college football is fearing this scenario in which SMU loses to Clemson, and then SMU gets leapfrogged by Bama, an idle 9-3 Bama, and gets left out of the college football playoff, even though SMU was undefeated in ACC play this year and finished the regular season 11-1. What sort of mutiny would we have on our hands? Not just from Jim Phillips, who has spoken his piece about this whole deal, and I respect his unbiased opinion on all things ACC, but just college football administrators, coaches in general, that could look at what happens to SMU and fear, what's the point of these conference championship games? SMU would be better off opting out of a conference championship game at this point, based on the comments that Ward Manuel has already laid out there.
Well, that's another thing. We're going to get into that, the Ward Manuel comment too. But what's the use of the conference championship games? Money. I mean, that's it. It's money.
Yes. I mean, they would say, what's the use from a competition standpoint if we can be hurt by this more than we can be helped by this?
Right. But their point all along will be, but you can be helped by it. And that your destiny's in your hands. And I understand that. And I agree with that. I don't buy the whole, well, we can be hurt by that. That's a defeatist attitude, man. You're telling your team, if you're a coach out there and you're saying, well, what's the sense of playing in this game if you can get hurt by it? You're literally telling your team, we may not win this game. It's a defeatist attitude. So I don't have a problem with that. That I don't have a problem with. The problem I have with, and I wrote about this today in USA Today. Think about this. What if you're Burt Magnus, the president of ESPN? You're sitting there in your suburban Connecticut home. It's freezing outside, snowing even, fires roaring. You got a nice hot cup of coffee next to you, and you're watching the playoff reveal.
This is a nice scene. I like this. I'm very cozy right now.
Ward Manuel, the Michigan AD in the committee chair, say it doesn't matter what happens to those teams that are not playing because they're done. There's no more data points for them. You got to be kidding me. So literally what you've done is basically just kneecapped ESPN's most popular property right now, or close to it. I would say the NFL is still the most popular, but it's a booming property for them, okay? What's going on? And he just kneecapped it. He just said nothing else matters for those teams behind the teams that aren't playing. And my whole point is, so let's say Georgia beats Texas, wins the SEC. Ole Miss beat the SEC champion by 18. That's not a data point? Are you telling me that's not a data point? So for him to say that there are no more data points for the teams that aren't playing is ridiculous. You've got to take the totality of the season. Now, I will say this too, okay? My guess is Ward kind of said something he wishes he didn't say.
He said too much.
Yeah, it's live TV and it happens. And I've done it. We've all done it. That was a bad misspeak. I'll tell you that right now, because you are telling everyone that you're not taking the totality of what's going on. You're going week by week and then changing. And that's, look, I get Ole Miss and I get the whole Lane Kiffin argument, but at the end of the day, Ole Miss, even after those 2 losses to Kentucky and LSU, which were brutal, those 4th down prayers that Kentucky and Ole Miss hit. I mean, Ole Miss could easily be 11-1 playing that championship game right now. Those 2 4th down plays were brutal, but man, you go to Florida, you got to win that game. You've got to win that game. And they go in there and they lose the game. And they got no one to blame but themselves. Yeah.
Don't have your star quarterback throw 3 interceptions in the final 2 minutes of a game against Florida.
And I'm not. And again, I know the Ole Miss fans are screaming, "What about Indiana?" I agree with you. Indiana shouldn't be in there either. So I mean, you're not like, I'm not saying, okay, I'm choosing Indiana over Ole Miss or Indiana over South Carolina. I think if Indiana and South Carolina played right now, South Carolina beat them by 2 touchdowns. So it's not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you have the ability to win a game and get in, like Miami, like Ole Miss, like Alabama, you have no one to blame but yourself if it doesn't happen.
You talk about things that you say on live TV that sometimes you wish you could have back. I was on
all the time, by the way. all the time.
It happens frequently. It happens frequently. On Tuesday, I went down the rabbit hole of talking about Ryan Day and this potential vacancy at Ohio State after the debacle of what happened against Michigan. And for the very first time, it feels like we're talking about a coach at this point of the season where it truly is title or bust. You could lose a national championship on the very last play, and
Right.
I still would feel like, yep, you got to fire Ryan Day if you do not win a national championship. Do you disagree with that notion at all before we get into the potential candidates that could be available for it? Because that was my regrettable comment, was kind of going down that line and then saying like, oh, I think a bunch of these SEC coaches could, potentially get that call and have to answer that if Ohio State does become open.
Yeah, I think it's you're talking about a guy that's 47-1 against everybody but Michigan.
In the Big Ten, right? Yeah.
That's in the Big Ten. That's very hard to fire a guy like that. But, I mean, if you're Ohio State and if your world revolves around that game, which it clearly does, you at least will look at that. I don't think they should fire him. It's not just the 47-1. He's recruiting at a high level. Like, they're top 5 every single year. And I know you'll say, well, anyone else gets in there, they can be top 5 too. Okay. But he's developing guys to get to the next level. They're not running afoul of the NCAA laws, whatever NCAA laws are left. All right. He's doing everything basically but beating Michigan. And that's a mental block clearly now at this point. I mean, that's you literally in the last month and a half of the season, Will Howard became this thrower that they could rely on, and they were throwing the ball deep. They were going to third level throws, which they hadn't done earlier in the year because they were stuck on this idea of, oh, Chip Kelly's here. Now we're going to run the ball like he used to at Oregon. Stupid. Okay. That's what it was. And I said that from the beginning of hiring Chip Kelly. You look, do what makes you good, what makes you exceptional and elite. Before Kyle McCord last year, his quarterbacks were averaging 41 touchdown passes a season. 41, Connor. So he gets a first-year starter in there who I thought didn't play that poorly in Kyle McCord. They go to Michigan. They lose that game. The interception in the last play of the game. Now it's all on Kyle McCord because he didn't throw it for 41 touchdown passes, even though he was a first-year starter. So you give up on him. He goes to Syracuse, and look what he is now, right? What are they with Kyle McCord right now, a second year in that Ryan Day system? Not the whole Chip Kelly crap that they panicked and did. In the Ryan Day system that has been tried and true, where is Ohio State now? Ohio State beats Michigan if Kyle McCord's their quarterback, and they beat him probably rather easily too. But you panic. That game makes coaches panic, and he panicked. He changed everything. They threw $41 million at a problem and didn't get anything from it. $41 million. Think about that. $20 million for the roster, which their AD Ross Bjork said they cost them $20 million to build that roster. All right. $10 million for Ryan Day's salary and $11.1 for the assistant coach salaries. $41 million. And still lost to Michigan. And they're 10-2. Now they can still win the national title. If you win the national title, then okay, everything's great. But if you don't, then what?
Then it's the most intriguing job opening. And I've said this before. I think it's the most intriguing job opening since Mark Richt was fired at Georgia. I think you can make that case that it's the best job vacancy available, given what you're going against in the Big Ten, given how the fundraising is clearly still there. You're going to have an athletic director that's going to absolutely go to bat for you in Ross Bjork until he leaves for another job. But like that's a great thing to have.
I say it again. Until he leaves for another job.
yeah. I mean, that's what he does. He's a climber. He's a Slytherin. That's what they do.
There is no better job than it's Ohio State and Texas, so there is no better. So if he leaves, it's because he doesn't want to deal with that nonsense. So
commissioner of the NFL, Ross Bjork is going to go. Yeah. So let's say this scenario does present itself. Ohio State doesn't win a national championship. They have this weird timing a la Alabama last year where they're really going to be exposed to the 30-day window, and it's going to get things moving in the coaching carousel. It's going to get things moving in the transfer portal, and there are a lot of different ramifications with the player personnel aspect of it. Who's the ideal candidate for this job that is, man, it is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity to get those resources in that place and knowing the tradition and the floor that Ohio State has had?
So I mean, we deal in hypotheticals. That's what our business is hypotheticals. I hate hypotheticals,
entirely.
but it's what it is, man. I wouldn't fire him. I absolutely wouldn't. But if you are talking about him getting fired, him losing his job, or even him going to the NFL, which is also a possibility.
Don't say he's going to the Bears. I can't deal with that. Come on, Matt. Like, let's move past. I can't even, when I see someone online that says that, I just instantly want to move past it. I'm like, I don't need that in my life. All right, I've got enough angst about the Bears. I can't handle the angst that Ryan Day is attached to right now.
There's
Let's
maybe
not even.
more than that, man. There are many more teams that are going to be looking for a coach.
Yeah.
Who's the ideal candidate? I mean, it has to be Marcus Freeman. It's got to be the guy that played at Ohio State, that knows Ohio State, that bleeds scarlet and gray. He's the perfect candidate. But I don't think he leaves Notre Dame. Why would he leave Notre Dame? There's really no reason to jump into that mess. Now, if they hire somebody else and somebody goes 3 or 4 years and they flame out, then he's fine to go back because he's been at Notre Dame for 3 or 4 more years, maybe won a national title. Who knows? Then you go back and kind of save your program. But I wouldn't follow. It's not really following Ryan Day. It's following that environment right now at Ohio State. Mike Vrabel's a good guy, but I don't know if you're Mike Vrabel and you can coach an NFL team or Ohio State, and you got to deal with all that nonsense that there's no regulations with the NIL. You're going to jump into that? I don't think so. Other than that, Matt Campbell might be a nice choice, but Matt Campbell doesn't seem like a guy who wants to jump into that big pond. I don't see that.
It's another job that I have.
He's always been hey, I want to develop young guys. It's not that I'm developing football players. I'm developing young guys. And if they become great football players, fantastic. And I think it's the other way around at Ohio State.
It's another job that I've heard Matt Campbell be linked to that would surprise people. And it's kind of the second best available job right now. Let's just say a certain opening, Chapel Hill, maybe more of a basketball school. That's just what we've heard behind the scenes, TBD on how that'll play out. But
interesting.
Yeah, it's just an interesting thing to throw out there, and that's nothing's official, obviously, with his interest or anything related. But that's just kind of what you hear. I'd be fascinated to see the swings they would take, though, because I don't think they would just go after Vrabel. With all due respect to him, a guy that Urban Meyer didn't even realize was on his staff. God bless Urban Meyer, man. That would be.
But is that real, or is he just kind of like is that just kind of Herb being Herb? Is that kind of Herb just kind of like he knows that he's just being, I can't say the word, on purpose. You know what I mean? Because that's just he likes gigging.
Why would you do that? Why?
Because he likes gigging people. That's who he is. His personality.
I would not gig Mike Vrabel.
I wouldn't either. But we have look. First off, we have no idea what's going through that cat's head.
True.
I mean, from day to day, maybe even hour to hour. Okay, so you don't have a guy on your staff for 2 years and not know him. Okay, come on. Of course he knew him. There was just some reason why he was gigging him. It's just only Herb knows. It's Herb's world, man, and only Herb knows.
All right. So,
by the way, the guy that got him to play Herb on the Netflix. Did you see the Netflix Aaron Hernandez?
I haven't yet, and I've been very tempted to get into that world, and I just haven't, for whatever reason, found it. That might be an off-season show.
I only watched the first couple episodes, but the guy that plays Herb is just such a dweeby guy, and I can guarantee you, Herb watched that and said, "Are you serious? This is the guy that made me." I guarantee he did that, 100%.
What are the chances that the guy who plays Urban in that show asked to follow Urban around and just shadow him for 2 weeks, and Urban's like, "Hell no, get away from me! I'm not showing you anything."
He's literally just some dweeby guy, man. And Urban's probably pissed off about it. Seriously.
Yeah. Oh God. All right. Other vacancies. It's been a very quiet coaching carousel so far. And I always love talking about this stuff with you because I think it's really intriguing and I think it impacts, the next 5-10 years of the sport. But an area that you're very familiar with, the UCF vacancy. I threw out a list the other day that had UCF fans up in arms because everything makes UCF fans up in arms, as we know. But
That's
Jamie
so
Chat,
true, man. That is so true.
they're Twittered Beetlejuice. That's what they are. Just don't say
Right.
UCF 3 times. They'll come to you. But Jamie Chadwell is the one that's kind of been linked to that job. And who knows, by the time that people are listening to this, maybe a decision has been made on that. But who's the candidate that kind of makes sense there? That's intriguing, maybe outside of Chadwell. That if you saw that headline today, you'd be like, oh, I actually think that makes a lot of sense. I really like that.
I don't know, but it's not Scott Frost. I can tell you that.
Yeah,
I mean, the whole idea of bringing guys back for an encore, I hate that.
retread. Yeah,
It's not even that it's retread. It's that, they've been there, done that. They're going to go back and think it's the same way. And college football, from when Scott Frost left UCF to go to Nebraska, my God, it's a completely different world. So you cannot expect Scott Frost to walk in there and think, all right, yeah, I'm going to go with what we have now instead of what we had, and think I can go back to what we had, and make that work, because I don't care if it's a square peg in a round hole. I'm going to make it work because we won here before. That's no, man, no. You need someone who gets college football now, because that's a good job. There's a lot of money, a lot of support in that job. They got really nice facilities. They're now in a power conference. They're in a winnable power conference. It's a very good job. You recruit a state like that, which now you have a little more heft in your ability to recruit players because it is a Power 4 conference. I think you go get somebody young, somebody that knows offense, because offense sells right now. And I don't think it has to be a head coach either. Like a guy like Charlie Weiss Jr. from Ole Miss.
that's why I suggested. Yep.
And quarterback job would be a brilliant hire for UCF. Now, I don't know if they would do that, but that's a guy I would go after. A young guy that knows offense, that recruits really well, that gets today's player, right? And then you have him, you get together with him and hire a general manager who does all the other stuff. And that, by the way, and I'm writing this for USA Today too this week, is the general manager is going to become more and more of an important part of college football moving forward, because coaches do not want to deal with this crap. They don't want to deal with the salary cap. They don't want to deal with how much money do we have for this guy or that guy. Then you just hire a general manager to do that stuff. Now, the thing is once you hire a general manager and give him that power, how much power does he have then? Because in the NFL, general managers have the power. So you're ceding a lot of power. So I think coaches want this idea of a guy that oversees the program, but not so much that they have so much power where they can make decisions that coaches typically make all-encompassing decisions.
Ryan Silverfield was the one I was thinking, the Memphis coach.
Yeah, another good one. Yeah.
And Memphis fans got all of my mentions about, like, wow, do you ever leave for UCF? It's like, what conference is Memphis in? What conference is UCF in now? Yeah, say no more. Memphis, great job. Been going on with my guys, Greg and Eli, for 6 years, like weekly, and love what they have built. Love the job that they did to be able to beat that Tulane team that everybody was kind of hyping up. And then they have that great showing on Thanksgiving. But just think that's a really intriguing possibility. And who knows, maybe UCF has already kind of moved past that, or he's not interested in a job like that, even though he has the experience there. You're going to be going to something unique this week. You haven't been going to, like, a ton of games and stuff like that this year, and kind of focusing on bigger picture stuff for USA Today. But you're going to a meeting with, instead of the SEC championship to see your old buddy, you're instead going out to Vegas because you like to gamble or something like that. That's just what you were saying before we came on.
I don't really like Vegas either. I mean, Vegas is one of those, it's one day. One day is good. Then after one day, you're kind of like, I don't know about this place.
1.5 days. 1.5 days.
Yeah, 1.5. All right, 1.5 is fine. One night is what I'm saying. All right. Yeah. The Sports Business Journal forum is out there, and all the movers and shakers and college sports, athletic directors, television people, they'll all be there. And it's a symposium, a forum of, the state of college sports. And, it's going to be interesting because it's going to be a week after the final poll comes out. And there will be definitely talk about where the 2026 format goes, because, the new contract begins in 2026. How many teams will it be? What will the format look like? Will there even be a selection committee? Which, believe me, that talk is now heating up. There'll be a lot of talk, obviously, about the pay for play, which is coming next year, and the $20 million salary cap. So there's a lot going on out there, a lot of stuff that really can define the sport moving forward for decades.
People want to see the selection committee gone at this point, I think. And I think you'd get a
Yeah.
lot of support for that, because even the Big Ten and the SEC, as much as people push back on this demand for 4 automatic bids apiece, they're getting to the place that everybody else wants to get to, just not in the way that everybody wants to get there. And they're trying to say, we don't want this to be subjective. We want to just look at the facts, look at the body of work, who we've been for the last 10 years, the last 20 years, and kind of take that out of the equation. Just say, make it the NFL in that way. Highest in those standings, boom, you get your playoff spot. We're not sitting here debating who's that 11 seed, who's that 12 seed. Jim Phillips is going to be irate if this plays out poorly for SMU after how he felt about the Miami seeding and all that stuff. But like, is there a chance that could happen and that we just don't have a selection committee at all in a couple of years?
Yes. And I respect Jim Phillips. It doesn't matter if he's irate. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter if Brett Yormark's irate. It doesn't matter, because the SEC and Big Ten will just say, all right, well, we'll just go do our own thing. Then what are you guys going to do? And that, look, it's brutal. It shouldn't be that way, but that's the reality of the situation. The television executives want the Big Ten and want the SEC. That's it. And do they want games from other conferences? Sure, they do. Of course. Colorado with Deion's a perfect example. The Canes, yes, of course. When the Canes are hot, when the Canes are good, it's great for college football. When Florida State's good, it's great for college football. We saw that, last year. So, yeah, there's certainly are pockets of other games they want, but for the most part, they know what drives their advertising sales. They're trying to make money too, the television companies, okay? They're making money off advertising, and the advertisers want to see the SEC and Big Ten because that's what draws eyes. So, again, the ACC can be upset about it. The Big 12 can be upset about it. The other Group of 5 conferences can stomp their feet. It doesn't matter. It all depends on how, and I hate to say this, how magnanimous the SEC and Big 10 end up being. They're going to say, all right, well, do we get 4 automatic bids? Do we move to 14 teams? And then we get 5 automatic? And then there's, one or two for one of the other leagues, and maybe a Notre Dame can get in if they hit this spot. Or, do you force Notre Dame's hand by saying we get 5, and there's 2 more for the Big 12 and 2 more for, the ACC? Then what? Because I that's another thing I've never understood is, what does Notre Dame do if their hand is forced? They can say that they're independent, they don't want to join a conference, but if the SEC and the Big Ten say, look, this is what we're doing, we're going to 14, and you got to be in a conference, what are they going to do? They're going to say, no, we're not going to be in a conference, and we're not going to be part of the college football postseason? Of course they won't. They'll join a league.
They'll join the Big Ten and get a significantly increased TV contract is what would happen if their hand was forced. But until their hand is forced, they're going to keep riding this out. And I don't think that the people that are like, oh, well, you can't get a first round bye, that's a big bummer. I think they're perfectly fine to host a home playoff game and have this great scene in South Bend and have a chance to be able to get a marquee win like that, and what it means for Notre Dame and what people have thought of Notre Dame with their struggles in the New Year's Six Bowls in the 21st century, which is really well documented. You kind of get a chance to break that. And I don't think they're necessarily, losing sleep over the fact that they can't get that first round bye. This hasn't forced their hand. Maybe a new system will.
No, but if your new system also said you cannot have a first round home game, you are always on the road no matter what.
Yeah, that's true. That changes it.
Then they're starting to think, all right, well, it might be time to get into a conference. And I'm not really forcing them into a conference. That's not really the goal. The idea is, it's not forcing Notre Dame into a conference. It's, I'm not saving one spot for them in the playoff in case they're good. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need that. If anything, you're going to need that one spot for a Group of 5 team. So that's kind of my point is, okay, you leave those at-large bids out there, and it's almost like you're saving something for Notre Dame. And believe me, I'm a guy who thinks if you're going to go to 14, just go all at-large, 14 at-large bids. Don't give any automatic qualifications, and then see where it goes. And then, then you're more than likely going to end up with 4 and 4 again. It'll be a similar type of scenario, I would think, or 5 and 3, or 5 and 5 even.
Last one for you. I know you got to run. SEC championship prediction. You're not going to be there because Again, you don't want to see me. But what do you think plays out on Saturday?
I hate to pick against the boogeyman. I do, man. I just do. But I think Texas gets them back only because I think Sark is really good at adjusting, at making adjustments, and I think he's going to make adjustments to their protection of what happened in the first game when they just couldn't protect. And man, that photo of Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning on the sidelines.
Well, that's something.
They looked like they were like, I'm not going in. And then the other one said, well, I'm not going in either. So I think he figures it out. And I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm going to go with Texas. I think Texas wins a close game.
Interesting.
Hate picking against the boogeyman too, but I am.
Boogeyman's still saving.
Yeah,
still saving.
I mean, the boogeyman could still easily step up and beat the hell out of Texas. There's no doubt about it.
True. Matt, you're the best. We'll talk really, really soon. Not see each other really soon, though.
No. All right. See you, brother.
Thanks, man. All right, Will. Let's end with some lad of the week. Are you going to go? It can't be Shane Beamer again. Shane Beamer's had so many lad of the weeks. Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume you're not going in that direction. Who is your lad of the week?
Mine's definitely out of left field. For our early signing period / early signing day, I'm going to go with the number one recruit in almost every service other than Rivals who are lost, Bryce Underwood. Here's where I'm going here. This guy has been the ire of many LSU fans. And the point that I want to make to you guys is that none of this is his fault. Okay? At the end of the day, if you're 17 years old and you get offered $12 to $15 million to give your family generational wealth, to get them out of that hole in a way that can only be made possible by, NFL money previously. Okay. I think that all of our collective feelings and rage and happiness need to be taken out on the adults. I often say this, I've been pretty consistent about, unless a kid goes out of his way to gouge somebody's eye or do something his mama didn't raise him to do, these structures in place are not Bryce Underwood's fault, okay? And as an LSU fan, you could talk about, he used us for leverage, whatever. At the end of the day, if you hear Dave Portnoy tell it, which I finally can unfollow him, such an exciting point in our lives together that we don't have to care about what Dave Portnoy says anymore. But he said that the wife of Larry Ellison, the number 2 richest man in the world, is the reason why Bryce Underwood flipped and that he came in with the bag and helped them out. And if you're an LSU fan or if you're the fan of any team today that's going against Oregon or USC or any of these big money schools, just know that there are some things that you simply can't fix. And, as much as Louisiana is a beautiful place, as much as Louisiana has gotten all these transfers, has made all these people fall in love with it, when you got $12 to $15 million sitting there, you were never going to raise that money. So at the end of the day, when that check came in, I know that everybody wants to pretend like everybody should be a fan of their school, even if you're from Belleville, Michigan. But put yourself back in your shoes at 17 years old. Think about how much that money would have changed your life. Think about how your mom would be crying and saying thank you, and how your mission would already be accomplished, and you would have to go wake up, put the cape on, and go save a team that had just won a title. And so that's the final point that I'm going to make here is that Bryce Underwood is saved. He has set himself up for a life that is not as glamorous as I think that many people would understand. When you know how much money that you're paying a kid at 17, I missed classes when I was 17. I missed homework when I was 17. I stayed out too late with my buddies. I made mistakes. That number is going to be held over his head until he leaves Ann Arbor and largely until he leaves college football. And so part of the benefit of kids growing up early and being professionals, contract employees, is that we could say, these guys are already employees. We could do whatever. Well, this is different, right? This is not, as we've already talked about enough, Nevin Shapiro paying 1/16 of the total of this deal to 100 different players. This is one guy who has been told and sold as a guy who will save Michigan football. And I understand that we all want to dump on him or whatever, but I just want to tell you to put yourself back at 17 and how you absolutely would have taken this money. And then what comes next? Yeah. They would have taken the money, but then what comes next? And that's the thing, is that when you see this kid play, I know it's going to be hard, especially if you're LSU fans, but approach him as a 17, 18-year-old kid who made the right decision for his family. If Michigan's struggling next year and he's getting the mess knocked out of him, like Christian Hackenberg, don't sit there and go, told you so, because trust me.
Friend of the program. Hack was great as a freshman.
True. True, very true. But you see what I'm saying? Like, if he's out there, getting shelled, don't think, these kids have a lot of weight on their shoulders, and now he has the entire state of Michigan, his home state, and I think it's great for him. I'm going to be honest.
Can I tweet at him?
Don't ever tweet at anyone, ever.
Can I tweet at him, do you know how many chicken fingers you would have had at Raising Cane's? What are you, a double slaw guy? How dare you?
It's the Breaking Bad meme where the guy's sitting on the pile of money, but it's Kane's chicken fingers. That would have been.
It's like I'm actually not a big toast guy. I'm just not. Sorry. All right, everybody, you do you. Fair or not, though. And yeah, like some of these numbers that get thrown out there, it's you can make up to X amount of dollars. It's very well known. This is an 8-figure deal potentially for him. I think everybody's been pretty transparent about that whole process. But I look at that number and I think if he fails to check, if he doesn't check at least one of these boxes, I think you could make the case it's a disappointment. Not that the kid's a failure, but that spending that type of money would be considered a disappointment. Win a Heisman Trophy, win a national championship, number 1 overall pick. If you check one of those boxes, worth that money. If you check 0 of those boxes, I would argue that's not going to be return on investment. And that's not to say that it's going to be like, oh, Bryce Underwood is a massive bust and he's never going to have success. No. I mean it strictly from an ROI standpoint of what are you hoping to get back with that when you spend that type of money, knowing that that type of money would have covered a lot elsewhere in the NIL space. And you are hoping that he can be that generational type player for you. LSU was hoping he was going to be another LSU Heisman Trophy winner. And Michigan, I think those are the 3 boxes. Heisman, national championship, number 1 overall pick. You got to check one of them, I think, to get return on that investment.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you're phrasing it that way, too, because, again, Michigan just beat Ohio State a couple of times in a row with random folks in JJ McCarthy. So at the end of the day,
4 is more than a couple.
Yeah. You're right about that. It felt made up, but it is 4. So, yeah, to your point, you've already seen the national title if you're a Michigan fan. Your first undisputed one, as you often say, since way back in the day, since the 40s. And so, point being, if you're going to pay this kind of money for a quarterback, you're going to have expectations, and that's what he signed up for. And I hope he at least meets a couple of those because I just want to see these kids win, man.
Michigan, perhaps second undisputed national championship since the Harry Truman administration, potentially. I think it's Harry Truman. I think it is, at least. I have to go back and check that. All right. I'm going with Brian Betty, the Auburn running back. If you recall, over the summer, he was shot in an incident in which his brother, Tommy, unfortunately was killed in Sarasota. Brian was in critical condition. Hugh Freeze was tweeting out updates of him, and it didn't look good. It really didn't seem to be trending in the right direction for someone who was expected to have a significant role in the Auburn backfield as well as special teams. Talked about when this happened about how, man, brutal blow for a guy that was going to have an NFL market with the new kickoff rules and having that become more important once again. And that was hopefully going to be his future. And if you've been following this, you know that he spent the last 5 months rehabbing. And last week, he surprised his Auburn teammates by showing up to practice ahead of the Iron Bowl. He was able to kind of walk in. He's got, obviously he's got some assistance with being able to do that, but just an awesome moment for that kid and seeing everybody kind of rally around him. And I can't begin to imagine what that's been like on his family to lose Tommy and then to watch Brian have this long road back. And for anybody that's ever experienced a family in the hospital for an extended period of time, those days are long. They are often thankless. And you just kind of wonder, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? And, I'm sure it's been tough because he's been watching this team, of course, from afar. The family got video of him celebrating the 4 overtime victory against A&M. It was cool to be able to see that. Auburn put that as part of a hype video going into the Iron Bowl. But Kendrick Falk talked about how they hadn't seen Brian in a year because I think he was banged up at the end of last year and then he was out for the spring or something. So seeing him for the first time in a long time, it had to be just so cool for his teammates to be able to see that. And Kendrick talked about that's why they've been trying to fight. And I'll criticize Auburn for a lot of things. I won't criticize their lack of fight, the amount of dudes on that team who still give a crap and still were taking care of their business down the stretch. And hopefully Brian's able to kind of inspire others and able to find his path, but cool to kind of see him. He was in the behind the end zone for the Iron Bowl and able to kind of take in that scene. I'm sure just a really, really difficult time this has been for that family going through all of this, but nice to see at least some sort of positivity and know that hopefully he's going to be able to to lead a life that at least has, positivity to it, and it's not just going to be sitting there in a rehab facility for for the rest of time.
Yeah, no, I 100% echo that, man. And I could go into a whole thing about some of the stuff. We saw Brian Robinson Jr. walking out to Mini Men, which is honestly one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Seeing that young man have another chance at the sport that he loved, and it's one thing. As insane as it sounds, it's one thing to take an injury, and then you take a non-contact injury. That's really fair. That's really unfair. And then you say over here, it's like, like this dude's future could have gotten taken from him off of something that, is just random in a way, right? So I always hate to see that, but to your point, love to see the kid getting back after it. And it'll definitely be in our thoughts going forward because a lot of that stuff is bigger than football.
Very much so. Yeah. In a season of frustration for Auburn, I think that was one of the positive moments. One of the things that I think they will look back on and have a great appreciation for. All right. Like I said before, we will have a full recap pod later in the day on Sunday, recapping everything that the selection committee decides, all of the things that happen in the SEC championship. We will break down as well. If you haven't, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the STS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.